everyone? Welcome to a Friday episode here at the Call Sheet Podcast on the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Kevin Smith. Not a hot route episode today. We're going to do one next week for the championship games. I'm going solo today because I really wanted to do this conversation before the week ended. With all of the vacancies that exist in the NFL for head coaching positions, I wanted to make sure we did a primer on what it takes to be a successful head coach, really at any level, but in particular at the NFL level. We're going to look at 4 areas all coaches or prospective coaches, all candidates will need to master if they're going to be successful as an NFL head coach. Before I do that, real quick, hey, I just wanted to shout out here to my college roommate, Eric Valkes, who is on Twitter at Vegas Valkes. And I wanted to say he's the sexiest man on Twitter. And I'm not saying that because I lost a bet to him and he weirdly wanted that to be the condition of the bet. That didn't happen, not at all. I did not lose a bet to Eric at Vegas Valkes in which he wanted me to deem him the sexiest man on Twitter. I just thought people needed to know. So, Vegas Valkes, if you're listening, congratulations. Sexiest man on Twitter. Now that business is out of the way, what do prospective NFL head coaches need to be able to master in order to succeed at their job? Before we get into that, just real quick, 8 current openings in the NFL, 8 different franchises at various stages of development, right? You have Arizona, Atlanta, Baltimore, Cleveland, Vegas, Miami, Pittsburgh, and Tennessee. The Giants' job has been filled. They've chosen John Harbaugh. But it's interesting. You look at all right, teams like Arizona, Las Vegas, Cleveland seem to perennially be in this cycle of losing. You know, what are they going to need to shake them out? I think we can caveat that question by answering a franchise quarterback, but the coach matters too. Yeah, then you got Baltimore and Pittsburgh kind of in their own category, perennial contenders who have had unbelievable stability. John Harbaugh, 18 years in Baltimore, Mike Tomlin, 19 years in Pittsburgh. And now they're casting about for a new coach for the first time in 2 decades. What will that search look like? And then you've got kind of franchises like Miami, Tennessee, Atlanta. They're up and down. They have a good year every once in a while. Maybe they even win the division, but then they lapse back. And they probably more than anything else need someone that can bring them consistency. Some of those teams do have their quarterback in place. I mean, Tennessee's pretty settled with Cam Ward. Michael Penix might be the answer in Atlanta. So what do they need? All these franchises need probably a different type of head coach. But no matter what type you hire, you could go for the rising offensive coordinator, Nathan Scheelhaase of the Rams, Clint Kubiak of the Seahawks. You could go for the rising defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley of Green Bay, or Jesse Minter with the Chargers. Or you could go with the established head coach being given another shot like the Giants did with Harbaugh. Kevin Stefanski, Brian Flores, those names are obviously out there in this coaching cycle. But again, doesn't matter who you are. Here are 4 areas that you need to master to be successful. Let's start with management, because more than anything, being a head coach is being an administrator. I mean, you are the face of an organization. You're responsible for how it runs on a daily basis. As a high school coach for 14 years, high school head coach, my duties entailed everything from scheduling, communicating with parents, communicating with teachers, coordinating with school administration. I was brought in on a lot of meetings with school admin about the football program. I did community outreach. I handled college recruiting. I ran the off-season program, the weight training program. I handled fundraising. I coordinated with our booster club. All of that, and I haven't said a word about actually coaching a football team. I mean, the coaching aspect of being a head coach, yes, obviously that's important. But if you can't do those administrative things, then you're going to struggle with the coaching aspect of it because it's about organization. Can you organize? At the NFL level, you don't have to do a lot of the things that I just mentioned, but you do have your own fair share of management. You have to deal with the front office and with ownership. And as you can probably imagine, that is a huge undertaking at the professional level. You deal with agents, you coordinate college scouting, you woo potential free agents, you manage the roster, make roster decisions, you handle the egos and the needs of your players. You're responsible for motivating them. You deal with the media. You supervise your other coaches. You delegate. You teach. I mean, it is an all-encompassing, never-ending job. You can be great with the X and O's, but if you are not great at management, your franchise will pull apart at the seams. You also need to build a staff. Task number 2. You have to build a staff. I think people see the hiring of a head coach as the end of the process. It's actually the beginning. Because from there, the task is even bigger. You know, football is so impacted by coaching. It's really the only sport where you stop in between plays to allow the coaches to involve themselves, insert themselves, direct the action. And because the skills of players are so specific to their position groups, you've got all of these assistants who have kind of like mini specialties. And you need to get the guys who are really good at their specialty in place. I mean, my first year as a head coach, I don't think I understood how important it was to have good assistants until I became a head coach. Because in my situation, the previous head coach didn't resign until May, which is very late in the process. And I was hired and confirmed by the Board of Education in late June, which meant I had about 6 to 8 weeks to get everything in place before the season started. We kick off here in New Jersey in late August. So it really left me no time to build a quality staff. I brought 2 assistants back that were on the staff of the previous head coach. They were both in their 20s. Neither one had been a coordinator before. I made one the DC, Frank Lasasso, who was on my show on Wednesday, has been a frequent guest here. Frank was in his mid-20s, had never been a DC. And I took Mike Capoletti, who's one of the best position coaches I've ever worked with. I didn't want to remove him as a position coach, so I made him the special teams coordinator, and I continued to allow him to coach the defensive line. But then I ran the offense. I had nobody to help me. I had no line coach. I had no one to coach the receivers or the running backs. I wound up hiring 2 kids just out of college and an older guy who was retired and kind of looking for something to do. And I spent most of my time coaching the coaches. I had to coach them to get them to be able to do the things as position coaches we needed done. It didn't go well. We won 3 games that first year. And it wasn't until after the year where I was like, wow, I need to build a quality staff. And that took a few years. You know, it's funny how hard it is to find good coaches who have their afternoons free and are willing to work really long hours for no pay. Funny how that's a tough job description to fill. But it wasn't until we really were able to build a quality staff a couple years down the road that our program took off. If you can't build the right staff, you're going to be limited. And I think in some ways that was one of the downfalls of Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, that the Steelers just never had elite coordinators. None of those coordinators went on to be promoted to head coach like you see in so many other places. There's no Mike Tomlin tree in that regard. What's the third thing you have to do? Now here's an area where Mike Tomlin really excelled. You have to establish a strong culture in your program. And I think that's a word that we need to look at. What culture? You hear it all the time, but what are we talking about? What's it mean? For me, I see culture as the norms of any institution. What are the norms? What are the expectations? What do you do on a daily basis? What are the habits people demonstrate? How do they conduct themselves? What is the expectation? It's easy for an organization to say, hey, we want to be great, but how do you build the greatness? The key is establishing habits on the everyday that model greatness. And then, of course, developing the behaviors necessary to achieve it. So, all right, take as an example, take discipline. All coaches want to have discipline. We're going to be a disciplined football team. But what happens if you're allowing your players to show up late to meetings, or to wear their earbuds in their meetings, or to skip physical therapy, or to train with their own trainer rather than with your strength and conditioning coach? That's not a disciplined team. And so don't be surprised if your team is not disciplined on the field when you allow those habits into your building. When Sean Payton came to Denver a couple seasons ago, one of the first things he did was he banned Russell Wilson's personal quarterback trainer from the building. And this got those guys off on a bumpy start. It ended in a divorce. But in Payton's eyes, Wilson wanted special treatment. He was kind of like, oh, I'm the quarterback, so I get to do, my thing. And he knew that he couldn't build the culture he wanted if he tolerated that, so he cut it out early. When head coaches allow guys to do their own thing off the field, they're going to do their own thing on the field. And there are countless examples of how these types of daily norms create the overall culture of a franchise. Mike Tomlin had a great ability to allow enough individuality and give guys enough freedom without it poisoning the well and ruining the culture in the locker room. I mean, when you listen to the way that former Steelers talk about him and what he meant to them and how he impacted them off the field, you get a pretty good idea of how well he was able to bring a locker room together and to do it consistently for 19 years. Culture is important. And building it is something that happens on a daily basis. You have to exercise the norms every day. And finally, let's get to number 4, because this is the thing everybody wants to talk about. Scheme. It's everybody's favorite subject. Blah, 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 management, culture, yada, yada, yada. What schemes are you going to run? That's what people want to know. Anybody who's ever played 5 minutes of Madden, they think they're a coordinator. They want to know the scheme question. And of course, I would be lying if I said scheme doesn't matter. A good head coach recognizes his personnel, the strengths and weaknesses therein, tailors his scheme accordingly. I mean, if you're the new head coach of the Steelers and you want to run a 4-3 and you're like, hey, I'm going to make TJ Watt an off-ball will linebacker. Well, that's bad scheme. That's bad. That's bad management of the personnel within the scheme. You got to marry it. You got to marry that stuff. If you're going to be the new OC of the Eagles and you're going to turn Jalen Hurts into a run and shoot quarterback, that's bad scheme. That's bad. You're mismatching your players and your scheme. The best ones can merge the two. I've talked about this on the show before. The famous story of Bill Walsh and how he kind of arrived at the West Coast offense. He had a big, strong starting quarterback when he was the OC in Cincinnati, early 1970s. Guy named Greg Cook, 6'4", 230, big arm, not real mobile. And back then, the passing games were all vertical, bomb the ball down the field. But Greg Cook got hurt, and the backup was a guy named Virgil Carter, who might have been 6 foot, and he did not have a big arm, but he was mobile, and he was accurate, and he could process quickly. And Bill Walsh thought to himself, why try to run Greg Cook's offense with Virgil Carter? And he began to tailor the passing attack to Carter's skills, timing routes, outlets, If the blitz is coming, there's a hot route built into the progression. And he trained Virgil Carter in what would become the West Coast offense. You don't need to be a Bill Walsh level innovator as a head coach, but you do have to match your scheme to your personnel. It sounds simple, right? It sounds simple, but man, you got free agency and you have injuries and you have a limited roster, and getting the right pieces in place to run a coach's preferred scheme, that can be challenging. And that is going to be something that whomever takes over in these new jobs, these vacancies, they're going to have to master that. Can I fit my personnel to my scheme? Now, what's your window to do all this stuff? Hey, if you're Pittsburgh, you're Baltimore, those job openings are probably attractive for the stability that they present. The Steelers and the Ravens are two of the most stable franchises in football. They tend to give coaches time to develop. You may have a longer leash in getting all these things we just mentioned together if you get hired in Pittsburgh or Baltimore. If you get hired in a place that's a little more reactionary, well, maybe not. Atlanta's owner is Arthur Blank. It's a good organization. They have stability within the ownership group, but Arthur Blank is in his 80s. He wants to win a Super Bowl before all is said and done. He may have a little less patience. Some other teams, they pull the trigger a little more quickly. Kevin Stefanski lasted 6 years in Cleveland. That's an eternity for Browns coaches. They hire and fire coaches like they're changing underwear. Big turnover in Vegas, too. You go to Vegas, you're probably going to have to win quickly. They just gave Pete Carroll 1 year. So you better come in with a plan, and you better come in with a sense of urgency. And yes, it helps to know how long you expect your leash to be, but you can't waste time in the NFL. As Jerry Glanville once famously said, NFL stands for not for long. So best of luck to all these prospective candidates. It's going to be fascinating to follow them as they go. All right. NFL divisional playoffs on tap this weekend. Best weekend of the year football-wise, I would contend, because you get 2 great games on Saturday, 2 great games on Sunday. You generally have the best 8 teams remaining, and I think we do. I really think we do have the best 8 teams remaining. The 2 games I'm most fascinated in. Houston at New England. Hammer the under, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if it's still there, but I locked it in on Tuesday over at FanDuel at 41.5. I don't know if the number's moved. I'll have to check, but 41.5. This is a Houston defense that gave up 6 points to the Steelers, a New England defense that gave up 3 points to the Chargers. They both are good on offense. New England better than Houston, but neither is explosive. It is freezing here on the East Coast right now. 20-some degrees in my neck of the woods, even colder up in New England. The conditions suggest a low-scoring football game, but I just want to see the defenses, man. The hitting. I'm excited for that. And then the night game. Chicago, LA at Chicago. Even colder conditions. The Rams haven't played a game in under 50 degrees, under 50-degree weather all year. And it's single digits in Chicago right now with the snow blowing sideways. What is that going to look like for Matthew Stafford and his crew? Can the Bears pull another Houdini act? They've won 7 games this year where they trailed in the fourth quarter. Can they pull another Houdini act and get to the NFC Championship? The Bears. Going to be a great weekend of football. We will recap it all on our Monday morning game ball segment. Until then, hope everybody has a great weekend. Stay warm wherever you are, and we'll catch you on the other side. Take care, everybody.